Laurie, could you just go back to the start of the process and just show me where this TD menu is?
Well, okay, all right, I can do that. You've surely used the TD menu before on a bridgemate, haven't you?
Probably, but I'm getting old and forgetful.
You're old and forgetful. Okay, all right, why don't we go back to the beginning? Okay, well, maybe I should talk a little bit about things generally. Okay, there we are. That's the screen you see at the very beginning, right? Everybody's seen that one. Even if you're a player only, that's the one before you push any button. Now, at that stage, there's only a setup button there. You can also do it by the setup key too, as well. I'll show you how to do that. In fact, that's often easier because so when you push the setup button, it asks you, well, it may either automatically go to the settings or it may ask you for a PIN. I would suggest that you choose the option in the bridgemates that actually requires people to put in a PIN. The reason I suggest that is that if you just have an open access, players invariably push buttons, and you don't want them to accidentally change setup options in your bridgemate, or even change their table number in your bridgemate, or anything like that. So if you make it PIN protected, they won't be able to accidentally do it. They'll only get this screen, and they won't be able to do anything more. Notice, for example, here's the reset button, which I mentioned earlier. Because it's set up and inactive, I just have to hit the setup button, and the reset's available to me, and I can actually reset the bridgemate if I have to, if it's locked up. Anyway, when you do get into the setup, I'm sure anybody that's directed has seen that screen. It tells you what the section is, the table number, and you should have it set for the for Australia, because technically you're only supposed to operate these devices within a certain frequency range. And of course, we want the English version. We don't want it in German or French or whatever else. Now, something else I might mention is that I'm quite a fan of, instead of locking bridgemates to specific tables, I'm a bit of a fan of using the scan select option instead.
So Laurie, just a comment. It might be worth just saying the default TD pin, if it's in, is just 0000.
No, the default pin is whatever you make it, right? And if you don't know what the TD pin is in your club, then you can look at your scoring program, because it's in your scoring program that you can set the pin. And I'd suggest 0000 is not a good pin for a number of reasons. You want people not to play well.
It's a great pin. I can remember it.
Well, if you can't remember it, right, then I suggest you look it up. And you can look it up in either bridgemate control, or you can look it up in your scoring program, just in the bridgemate settings. So, for example, options, your bridgemate options. Okay, and there we are. TD pin, 4 digits. That's the one that I happen to have on this one.
So did you put that pin in yourself?
I did. I've got different pins. In fact, lots of clubs I work at have different pins.
Yeah, because the pin I use is the one that's in the book, which is 749.
No. Getting confused. Yeah. This is the TD pin, right?
Okay, that's how I get into mine. Yeah.
No. You're talking about the setup pin.
Okay.
Different. The setup pin is the pin number you put in where it asks you here on the bridgemate.
Yep.
This has nothing to do with the TD. The TD pin is things you would use when you want to remove a score, when you want to put an average in, those sort of things.
Okay.
When you want to change settings on the bridgemate itself, you need to use the setup pin. And there's more than one of them. Now, you mentioned 749. If you put in 749, then the screen appears, and the bit that's highlighted is the first line. Right? So the section. There's another useful pin, 769. If you put that pin in, it comes down automatically. It starts off in the channel line. So if you want to change your channel, there's a few keystrokes less if you put in 769. doesn't make any difference if you're changing a couple of bridge mates. But if you're at the Gold Coast Congress and you're changing the channels on 350 bridge mates, then it takes a lot more time if you use the wrong pin.
Yeah.
Now, as for channel numbers, a lot of clubs just use 0 or 1 or whatever else. They're okay, although they tend to encroach a bit on the wavelengths of some other devices. I'd suggest you run your channel somewhere, choose a channel somewhere in the 20s. Much less problems with interference and things like that, or conflicts and whatever else. It doesn't really matter as long as you know what the channel number is. Sometimes you want to run different things on different channels. Not too often, but sometimes. Now, I'm a great fan of, as I said, instead of allocating a bridge mate to a particular table, and you always, bridge mate 3 always goes on table 3. I often, for example, just put them on scan select, which means when the players turn them on, it actually asks them what their table number is. So it means you can randomly grab a bunch of bridge mates, throw them on a number of tables, and not care about getting 1 on 1, 2 on 2, 3 on 3, 4 on 4. Also, if you have them locked to tables permanently, the lower number is always a lot more work, a lot more wear and tear than the higher numbers. While here, it doesn't really matter what bridge mate you put wherever you like. If you want to do that, then you put these settings on instead. Instead of a section number, you push the plus or minus button till you get to the scan option, and the table number and the table goes to select. So when they push the button of the bridge mate, it asks them what table. They put in the table number, and then they're off and running. And also, if you put a whole lot of bridge mates on tables early on, rather than leave it to the last minute, and then you don't have as many people turn up, you don't really care because you just put your table numbers where they are or whatever else, and they start off and off you go. And you pick up the extra bridge mates and put them away later.
Laurie, how do you change that section to scan?
Well, same as you change the section from table 1 to table 2 to table 3.
Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah.
Just use the plus or the minus keys. Easy.
I've got it now. Yep.
That's all.
Okay.
And it really depends. Like if you've got a room totally set up right, and the bridge mates always stay on the same tables, then it's fine. But if you're putting them away, putting them out, packing them up, etc., then it's often better to try these settings instead. Okay, so all right. So if you're on that screen or the one before, and you want to, we're back to getting data out of the bridge mates, aren't we? Okay, if you push the info button, needless to say, you get some more info. But actually, before we do that, I might also say, this is only the first screen. There's an up and down arrow. There's more things on later screens. If you push the arrow down a bit further, you'll get to here. And this is a setup code. As I said, if you're going to activate the PIN code on the setup so that people can't get into the setup, then you just need to change that from off to on or etc. Often, if you push the setup pin, you automatically get to the first page. The PIN number's turned off. Go in there and turn it on, and then it is PIN protected. The other thing it's useful is the contrast. You know how some bridge mates are a bit dull or look a bit dull? You can just go down and use the plus and minus to make it change the contrast or the brightness and things like that, which is useful just for individual bridge mates. Anyway, if we go down a bit further, that's what happens when you hit the reset button. Of course, it asks you whether you really want to reset. You said OK, and off it goes. OK. There's our scan page. You hit the info button, and you get some more info. And not very useful info, but things like it tells you what the firmware is. It should be. I hope everybody's running 3.1.1. It's been around. It's been the current firmware for about 4 years now. If your bridge mates are really old, then they might be on an earlier version. And it also tells you when your bridge mate was made. Now I've got some fairly old bridge mates, Like this one, I took a picture of, was made in January 2009. That's 16 years ago. That's a long time. Quite old technology, but they are pretty robust. You drop them on the floor, and you pick them up and they work, and etc. etc. Okay, anyway. The other thing that's useful, while we're talking about little things on the BridgeMate console, is although the system's relatively robust, the reception can vary a bit. Now, for a whole lot of different reasons. Sometimes you might have a BridgeMate that's not really, it's pretty only sending stuff intermittently. It's pretty tardy and slow. There's a little lag time. You've all experienced that, haven't you? What's happened here, probably, is that the little BridgeMate over time's wandered off. What the frequencies wandered a bit, sort of drifted. Things that can affect things like that are, temperature, humidity, those sort of things, dropping it on the floor a few times, those sort of things all potentially can cause the frequency to, which is working on to sort of drift. So it's often worth looking at the tuning and actually fine-tuning the BridgeMate. So what you do if you want to do that is you get to this screen, which is the same one. We were about to push the resend button to send some scores. And notice, and if you hold down the button, if you push the button 5 on the BridgeMate, up will come 2 more lines. Up will come the RF number and a fine tune with a number there. And the bigger that number there, the less likely your BridgeMate is to be efficiently sending and receiving data. Anything with a double digit, like 16, 17, 20, means your BridgeMate's not communicating very well with the server because it's working on a frequency. Its frequencies wavelengths drifted quite a way. And by pushing the 5 button once, this appears, and if you hold it down again for a second, it'll drag it back to 0. And all it's doing, it's actually resetting a factory reset, or whatever the factory value for the frequency for channel, in this case 21 that I've reset to, is on. So not a bad idea just to look at your BridgeMates and your club every so often. Go into the setup, hit the info button, hold down the button 5 for a moment, see the number that comes up, which can be quite large sometimes, and then hold down the 5 again and take it back to 0. When you've zeroed it, it looks like a 0.
So 0 is good.
0 is good, yeah.
Okay.
And as I said, if it's above if it's in the double digits, it hasn't been functioning very well at all. And that'll normally solve most of your problems. You won't have reception problems now. The BridgeMates will behave probably better than some of the others in the room. It is also conceivably possible that sometimes the frequency settings on your server wander as well. But when that happens, you're going to have trouble communicating with all the BridgeMates in the room rather than just one BridgeMate communicating. And the easy way to sort that out is to go into the BridgeMate control software, into the BWS, and go to channel selection and choose a different channel. Just change the channel and set it, and then take it back to the original channel that you really want and set it. And all you're doing there is you're just reinitializing the factory setting for the particular channel you've chosen. So if it's wandered a bit, you've just reset the factory channel settings, and now it will function perfectly. Okay.
I've just done 3 of mine while I'm listening to you, and they're all on 24.
Well, there we are. Now they might work a lot better, Jean.
I hope so.
They don't need a server as well.
Will it help my bridge?
No, but it might help you. It might help give you less issues with. Might reduce a couple of director calls if you'll complain about the data's not going through.
Okay, then I can concentrate.
But yeah, it's over time. It's natural that things do drift, And even so, there's still atmospheric issues which can be a problem. The other thing is, the reason I suggest you use a channel in the 20s is that, as I said, to avoid interference. I'll give you a very simple example. There's a few clubs I go to where they have a radio microphone, a wireless microphone, and that's fine. It works fine. But I have a bit of a bad habit of putting it on the table with my desk where with all my other stuff, right? If I put it too close to the server and I've chosen an unfortunate channel, then suddenly everybody in the room is suddenly having trouble getting data to send to the bridgemate. So that's because the wireless frequency of the microphone is pretty close, not too far off, or at least impacting upon the the settings I've got, the frequency settings I've got for the serve. So I remember a scenario where everything was perfect when we tested it, and then when the session started and we turned on the microphone, nothing worked. That was at a national event. Took a while to fix, because of course when you change the channel, which we had to, you've got to change the channel on all the bridgemates as well. That's not quite as trivial. All right. Anybody want to ask anything more about just this sort of mechanical stuff with bridgemates?
Yeah, can you just show me one more time where it is in the BWS that you tick that box to say accept the reset scores?
I'll just minimize this. I need to open a BWS, won't I? Actually, no, I actually need to open a session. Actually, I probably don't. Yeah, here it is. So, normally when you open the BWS, what you see is, I've got a blank one here, but normally you've got the results with all these things on it, right? If you go to the results tab and go to the backup tab, this will appear. Now, the backup tab isn't visible with everything. Because if you've got the round monitor, you don't see the backup tab. The board monitor, you don't. The result matrix, you do. Players, you don't. So you need to choose a tab which actually is showing physical scores in your BWS, and then you can go to that's normally what you see normally. You go across to backup scores, tick that, and then you're ready to go. It's good not to have it ticked permanently, because if somebody does accidentally send some scores from a bridgemate, you don't want them in the BWS unless you know where they came from. So normally you wouldn't have it ticked, but you need to do that, otherwise you're not going to get anything. Of course, sending scores from the bridgemate is the very last resort when everything else doesn't work. Normally recovering the server, relaunching, reconnecting, all those things go before you consider doing this.
Laurie, a question about the reset function on the actual bridgemate machine.
Yep.
What does that actually do? Does that clear out that machine and then reload the scores from the server? Is that how that works?
No, what it does, it resets the bridgemate. It takes it out of the session, and it takes it back to the. It returns it to how it looks at the very beginning. Takes it back to there. So now the player needs to log back onto the session. So they can do that by, depending on either hitting the OK button, and if you've got it locked to a table, it'll come up with A1 or A5 or A7, and you push the button and you're back to where you should be. If you've got it on the scan options, then it'll ask them for the table number. Once they put the table number in, they're back into the system.
Okay, but the scores that they had already entered would still be there. They haven't been.
Yes. It's like when you have a faulty bridgemate, and you thought, I'll fix it up properly later, and you grab another bridgemate out of the box, and you put in the table number, and it says this table number's in use. Do you want to proceed? It asks for the PIN number, you put it in, and it takes over the role of the other bridgemate, and all the scores are there. Something else worth mentioning with all that process is that you're nodding your head, so you've done this a few times, replace one bridgemate with another. you get presented with a number of options. You get two options. You get continue, and you get also asked about the data, whether continue or erase it. You obviously choose continue. However, if you're running the scan options, some players will invariably put in the wrong table number, because often they put in their board number instead, for example. Now, if they're starting with a low numbered board, that might correspond to a table. If they're starting with board 25, you probably don't have 25 tables, so you're okay. And of course, if they're quick, they might get the table number in before the real table puts their table number in. When the real table tries to put the table number in, they're faced with exactly what happens when the director does it. The director says it's started by another. This bridgemate has been commenced by another table. Do you want to proceed? And ask for a PIN number. You put in your TD PIN, and now when it asks about erasing the data, you hit erase because you don't want any scores that they put into the wrong table in your system. In fact, I really enjoy pushing the erase button because that gets rid of the data at the table who got it wrong and the names, and now then it logs them out, and then they've got to do and put the right names against the right table. So there are uses where you do want to erase the data, and there are times when you don't want to erase the data. And of course, when you get it wrong, you can always resend it, but we won't talk about that.